Happy Thursday, everyone, and welcome to the Early Edge. We are brought to you by BetMGM, the sportsbook born in Vegas. My name is Sia Nejad, and we are continuing with our conference previews as we are on the doorstep of college football season and NFL season, by the way. And we're going to break things down, all things ACC today on the Early Edge. Let's bring in a couple of the stars of the show because we got a lot of teams to break down. And we're going to start, ladies and gentlemen, with Clemson. We got Emory Hunt. We got Tom Casale. Emory, I'm going to start with you. We're starting at the top, and we're going to break down some win totals here. Clemson, Cade Klubnik is back. They're returning a bunch of guys on the offense and the defense. It's a 9.5 win total, very much juiced to the over at minus 220. What do you like here, the over or the under?
Well, you got to go over, man. Sometimes you can overthink these things, but when you look at Clemson and how they're built consistently year after year, on both sides of the line of scrimmage, offensive line has a couple of NFL prospects. Defensive lines have a couple of NFL prospects, first-round picks, to be honest. And Cade Klubnik, if he can bottle up what he did the last couple of games of the season, the ACC title game, and how he played versus Texas, then, man, you have to like this team to not only go over, but be in contention for the national championship. So because this is always a very good team, Dabo Swinney does a great job of not only cultivating high school talent, but developing these guys where they consistently have a great team year after year. I like this to go over for sure.
Yeah, I agree with Emory. I just did the Clemson betting preview for CBS Sports, and they haven't played for a championship since 2019, but they are 50-16 over the last 5 years. Most fan bases would kill for that. At Clemson, they're starting to wonder who's going to be their next head coach. But I do think Dabo has the team this year. They're experienced. They have a lot of veteran leadership. And, you can say what you want about Cade Klubnik, but in the short data we have in this new era of college football, experienced quarterbacks matter. And here's the thing. They can lose to LSU, and I still don't think they're going to lose twice in the ACC. I just don't see it. They're just head and shoulders above everyone else, in my opinion. So even though it's juice, you got to go over the 9.5 here.
Yeah, it looks like Clemson in the college football playoff and perhaps winning the ACC. It feels a little inevitable, but there's other teams that will have something to say about that. One of them, Tom, is the Miami Hurricanes. Listen, 10-3 last year. Like, you look back and you're like, 10-3, that sounds pretty good for Miami, but that season could have gone a lot better. Your thoughts? Obviously, Cam Ward not there anymore, replaced by a guy that we know. Do you like the over 9.5 wins at plus 130, or you're looking at the under?
Yeah, I'm kind of on an island here at CBS when it comes to Miami. I know a lot of people aren't that high on them. I don't know. Maybe I've seen the You documentary too many times, but I like this Miami team. I just don't buy in college football. I don't buy into the narrative that, they won't be better because Cam Ward isn't there. I saw Peyton Manning leave and Tennessee win a national championship. It's all about the team in college football. And in my opinion, there's not 10 teams that have more talent than Miami top to bottom. So when you look at this win total, I see it as Notre Dame and Florida. If they split those games, I think they have a good chance to go over, and I actually like them to beat Notre Dame. So I'm going to go over the 9.5 wins here.
Y'all not going to fool me, man. You could take Carson Beck out of Waffle House and put him on a beach. It's still Carson Beck. That's the thing. So how he plays in these big high leverage games is going to be the biggest concern for me for Miami. And I love how Tom brought up the two games that I think Miami will lose those games. That's Florida and Notre Dame. But yes, Carson Beck can play ball. Obviously, he's a Division I Power 4 starting quarterback. He's won some games. He's not a bum by any means a stretch of the imagination. But when we're talking about national championship, when we're talking about can you play above the X's and O's when things aren't going as great, we saw that at Georgia, and we're going to see it at Miami. So that's why I kind of have them going under this win total. They'll be a 9-win team. We'll be debating whether or not they should get in the postseason with 3 losses. And depending on how the season turns out, maybe we might be right that they should get in, but Carson Beck has to play above the X's and O's consistently in order for me to move off my opinion on what I saw last from him at Georgia.
Yeah, I kind of lean to the under there as well, but I'm not paying the minus 155 to find out. Let's move to Louisville. Speaking of new quarterbacks, we got Carson Beck in Miami. We got Miller Moss at Louisville coming over from USC. There's some pretty good strengths here, Emory, in my opinion, especially at your position, the running back. What are your thoughts on an 8.5 win total, just to the over at minus 160?
I'll take the under because I feel like the ACC has gotten competitively better across the board. But you're right, that running back is outstanding. at Louisville. And Miller Moss played really well earlier in the season at USC. Had to win against LSU and had some good moments out there on the field. But I like he's going to a quarterback-friendly offense. So he's leaving USC quarterback-friendly, going to another quarterback-friendly offense with Brom. But this schedule, to me, you got at Miami, at Virginia Tech, and at SMU. The road games are kind of tough. And when you're not really thinking about if the defense is going to get significantly better for Louisville, you lose Jalot, the outstanding edge rusher they got. He's now playing for the Kansas City Chiefs. So I have some questions about Louisville's defense, which is why I like them to go under this total.
Yeah, I agree with everything Emory said, especially about the schedule. I thought Louisville's the toughest team out of all of them to pick the over-under. I can see them ending up a lot of different ways this year. You know, they lose 8 starters on defense. They lose 3 offensive linemen, so they're replacing quite a bit. But going to the under for me is what Emory mentioned about the schedule. They're the one ACC team that gets on paper the top 3 other teams with Clemson, Miami, and SMU. That's a really tough schedule. So I think, you know, similar to Miami, and we'll talk about SMU, I think they'll all be around their win total. But because of the schedule, I got to go under with Louisville.
Yeah, keep an eye on Isaac Brown this year for Louisville, but maybe next year or in coming years in the National Football League. All right, Tom, you mentioned SMU. I happen to know you're big on SMU. So I look at their win total. It's 8.5 wins here, minus 110 each way. I got to think, by the way, I should acknowledge you're all fastening your top button. So thanks for being a team player. Tom, do you like this team? Are we taking the over on SMU?
Well, my wife yelled at me the last time I was on because I was the only one who didn't have the top button. So I had to do it. Well, listen, a guy who still has 3 Eric Dickerson SMU jerseys is going over SMU. You know that. I honestly think in this new age college football with all the nil, SMU is the best team positioned to become a powerhouse. They have a ton of money to spend, and I like how they're spending it. You know, having the money and going to get transfers, anybody can do that. But I like the teams that, you know, systematically try to replace what they lost with quality players. They don't get too crazy like Florida State did last year. So if SMU hits on the transfers on the defensive line, because that's where they lost the most talent, I think they're going to be good again. They get Miami and Louisville at home. That's big. For me, they got to split with Baylor and TCU. If they split those games, I think they go over. But I don't think SMU is a one-year wonder. I think they're here to stay.
Listen, I said this earlier last year before the season kicked off, and I'll say it again. SMU was not wrong. They was just early in terms of paying players. Look at where we are now, guys. They were ahead of the curve. So listen to them back in the early 80s. Exactly, right? They had it all figured out. So when you think about this schedule, if we could pull that schedule back up, this is what concerns me about SMU. They'll be a good team. They got the taste of the playoffs. But if you look at that stretch between October 18th to November 1st, don't sleep on Wake Forest. That's a very tough trap game in between Miami and Clemson. And week 2, September 6th against Baylor. That's a very strong football team and a big test for SMU. We'll learn a lot about the Mustangs in that ball game, but everywhere else, like they have enough talent. Again, they got the taste of being in the postseason last year, so we know they know what it takes to get there. They played Clemson really hard in an ACC title game, and they were just cold out there against Penn State, so I ain't gonna hold that against them. Outside of Bob Hayes in the Ice Bowl, no one was as cold as him as SMU was out there in Happy Valley, so I get it. But this is a good football team, but I'm gonna go under this total based off that 3-week stretch that has Clemson, Miami, and Wake Forest sandwiched in between those two.
Let's move ahead, Emory, to North Carolina. Gio Lopez at quarterback there. And I believe, if memory serves, they may have a new head coach. God, for the life of me, I can't remember his name. But Emory, talk to me about whether you like the 7.5 win total, plus 140 to the over plus, minus 165 to the under.
Listen, Bill Belichick will learn right away. That's the guy, right? Schematics is not as important in college football. It's about Jimmys and Joes, not X's and O's. Now, until he gets those Jimmys and Joes, then the X's and O's will make a lot of sense. But right now, he's trying to build that roster. You mentioned Gio Lopez. I'm upset that he left the Sun Best Conference. He was going to be a future star for South Alabama, played really well, but it helps them out right away because you're still trying to work back Max Johnson, who is in his last season of college eligibility. But Gio Lopez is going to be the guy, dual threat player, tremendous talent. And as you build the trenches on both sides of the ball, I think it's going to be a work in progress. Just like I said for Louisville and just like I said for other teams in the ACC. It's about, everyone else around them gotten better. So, yeah, we'll learn a lot about them against Charlotte and the potential. But everywhere else, I think this is a tough slate for North Carolina, so I'll go under 7.5.
Yeah, I lean the under too. I mean, I think, in my opinion, this is the toughest team in college football to evaluate entering the season. Obviously, they have an icon of a head coach coming in, going from the NFL to college. And to be honest, the schedule isn't that bad. The schedule kind of sets up for a good season. There's no Miami, there's no SMU. They got TCU. That's a tough game in the opener. But I think Lopez at quarterback is going to be the key. Is he the guy? For me, this comes down to the last 2 weeks. They got Duke, they host Duke, and then they go to at NC State. They travel there. I think this win total, if you want to sweat, bet this one either way, because I think this is coming down probably to the last game at NC State, but I'm going to lean under in Belichick's first season.
All right, we're leaning under 6 wins last year for North Carolina. Gentlemen, we just covered some of the better teams or projected better teams with respect to the win totals. Now we're going to go to some of the win totals for the bottom teams. You mentioned Wake Forest, potential sleeper. We're going to Syracuse, California, Stanford, and UVA. That's coming up next on the Early Edge. We're back on the Early Edge on CBS Sports Network. And Emory, Tom, we got to cover some of the bottom feeders. I hate to say it, maybe they'll impress us, but some of the lower win totals in the ACC. We're going to start with a team that I'm just very interested in, Stanford. It's a 3.5 win total here, plus 145 to the over, mind you. Tom, I'm going to start with you. The reason I'm interested is they've got this interim head coach thing with Frank Reich. Andrew Luck is their GM. By the way, he's only 35 years old if he wants to come back to the NFL. Colts could probably use you. Nonetheless, what do we like on this win total, Tom?
He might be going back to the NFL after taking this job. Stanford under 3.5. I gave that out as my first win total bet when the numbers first came out. I mentioned SMU being in a great spot in the nil era. I think Stanford is the exact opposite. This might be the toughest job at FBS right now. Troy Taylor gets fired. They bring in Frank Reich. I don't think he's the long-term answer. The roster lacks talent and depth. Oh, how about this schedule? BYU, SMU, Miami, Notre Dame. They only have to travel 26,000 miles this year because for some reason Stanford's in the ACC. And I'll say this. They better beat Hawaii in week 0. If they lose that game, I mean, I'm not going to guarantee under 3.5, but let's just say I'll be putting items in the Amazon cart. I think it's going to be a long year on the farm for Stanford.
I'm highly disappointed in Stanford. I'm pretty sure when they read the fine print, they just thought it was all Coast Conference as opposed to Atlantic Coast Conference. Man, all those games on the road, they got to go to the other side of the country. And you talked about Hawaii. That's a sleeper team in the Mountain West this year. And they got to go to BYU. They got to go everywhere. And so I just think that this team is a year away from being competitive. Now, it can be done. We've seen it done at Northwestern. We've seen it done at Tulane. We've seen it done throughout the Ivy League. Columbia has had winning success recently. It's crazy to think about what that football program was. And Stanford has done it before. So we know it can be done. It's going to take them a little while to get there. It's hard to find 4 wins on that schedule, in my opinion.
Well, we know Stanford's not one of our sleeper teams, but I could have sworn you mentioned Wake Forest, Emory, or maybe it was you, Tom, or both of you, probably both of you, based on the cheating I've done with the over here. The win total is 4.5, plus 105 to the over. Emory Hunt, you like it?
Yes, take the over for Wake Forest because if you go to America's position, they have 2 of the outstanding tailbacks in the country, right? They have, Jamario Clemens, who transfers in from Duquesne, was a tremendous runner in the FCS. He transfers up, and Damon Claiborne is already there in tow. He's an NFL prospect, a high-level NFL prospect. So they have 2 legit studs at tailback. And when you think about the defense of Wake Forest, because you're able to run the football by osmosis, you'll be able to stop the run because you see it every day in practice. So this is going to be a tough out for a lot of teams in the country. And the way the schedule sets up for them, they can get on they get a nice lather built up against Kennesaw State, Western Carolina, NC State before they have to go and face America's team in Georgia Tech. So that's the first toughest test for them. But when you have Jamario Clemens and Damon Claiborne at tailback, to me, I like this to go over because they can run the football. And the schedule's not as bad as it looks on paper.
Yeah, I think Emory and I see the same thing with Wake Forest. This is, I think Wake Forest and Duke for me are two teams that could end up being better than what people think. Emory mentioned the schedule. Listen, the NFL and college football is a little different. When the NFL schedule comes out, people like to say win, win, loss. That's impossible to do. The talent differential between teams just isn't that big. In college football, you can look at winnable games. Kennesaw State, Western Carolina, Delaware, Wake Forest will be double-digit favorites in all three of those games. That's 3-0. And then they only have to win 2 ACC games. This is one of my favorite win totals in the ACC. I think Wake Forest goes to a bowl game this year.
Very, very interesting stuff. Well, let's talk about Syracuse because they had a really good season last year, but some of those parts are no longer there. Tom, the win total is 5.5. It's plus 155 to the over. Your thoughts?
Yeah, listen, I live near Syracuse, and I know, like me and others, we think Fran Brown, he's the guy. He's the long-term answer here. But I think they take a step back this year. Fran inherited kind of a veteran team last year, and he was able to get Kyle McCord from Ohio State. He ends up throwing for an ACC record, 4,779 yards. So you lose him. And then, listen, you guys know I'm big on the offensive line. I study offensive lines. My son plays center. I love them. The offensive line is depending on 5 transfers with only 37 career starts. That really hurts you, I think, early in the year because the line plays as a unit, and we've got 5 new starters. I just think they're going to be off to a slow start. Road games: Tennessee, Clemson, SMU, Georgia Tech, Miami, and Notre Dame. I mean, that's got to be the toughest road schedule in the country. Give me under 5.5 wins.
Yeah, I'm right there with you, Tom. It's just when you have so much turnover. I know that's going to be the common theme when we're talking about this era of college football, but man, that's a lot that went out the door, especially at quarterback with a guy that was playing with a chip on his shoulder and Kyle McCord, now having to replace him along with Arondé Gasson II, a legit stud at tight end / receiver, along with a guy on the opposite end, Fadil Diggs, who's now with the New Orleans Saints, who's a tremendous pass rusher, having a really great camp. You lost a lot of production, and in this schedule that you showed, that's a lot to ask for a team that's grabbing guys from all over to piecing together to formulate a team. It's going to take them a while to get this going. I think they'll flirt with 6 wins, but right now I have more confidence in them going under this total.
Let's talk about whether Cal is going to flirt with 6 wins. Emory Hunt, their win total is 5.5. Again, plus 135 to the over, so the money is certainly on the under here. Devin Brown, the new QB at Cal, but this is a consistently losing team. Where are we at on this win total, Emory?
At least he's not one that got off of 33. I'm so glad. That's a win, right? That's worth 1 win in my book for Cal. So they got 1 on the board. But when you look at the schedule in all seriousness, it's tough for them to find a lot of success when you have so many guys coming in. So much production went out the door. Mendoza is gone. Jaden Ott is gone. That's 2 high-level NFL prospects that are out the door. And then you have a really tough slate in terms of Oregon State, Minnesota, at Boston College. It's a very long trip to Chestnut Hill. So, I just think this is a team like Stanford, a year away from being, acclimated to the ACC and getting their recruiting up to par. So I'm going to go under this total.
Yeah, I have to go under too. There was a mass exodus of players in the spring portal. They lost 30 players in the spring. So that's tough. You got Justin Wilcox is now scrambling to fill different spots. Very similar to Stanford for me. I don't know if Cal makes it in this new era of college football. With all the players gone, I'm going to go under.
All right, let's talk about UVA. 6.5 is the win total. Juice to the under at minus 155. Tom Casale, what are your thoughts?
Well, I went under here. I was on the edge, and then I saw me and Emory agreed on everything else. So I said, I'm going to go under just to disagree with him on one. My main argument is I don't know if I'm sold on Tony Elliott yet. The team is always sloppy. There's a lot of dumb penalties when I watch them play. I think they're improved, but I'm just 6.5. It was 5.5. I go over. 6.5. Give me under.
I'm going over, and I will explain a lot more later in the show because I am big on the hooves coming out of Charlottesville.
Interesting. More to come on University of Virginia. Ladies and gentlemen, we are just getting started here. Coming up next, more ACC futures. But guess what? Zack Cimini, he's joining the huddle with Emory and Tom. That's all coming up next on The Early Edge. We continue with our ACC futures here on CBS Sports Network, but Zack Cimini joining the party. And true story, he showed up and he didn't have his top button fastened, but he felt out of place. He wanted to be a team player. So here we all four of us, maybe looking ridiculous to you, but we're feeling pretty good about it. Zack, because you're such a good team player, I'm going to ask you the first question here. Talk to me about who you see in the ACC title game.
I'm going to go with Clemson versus Louisville, and I have more to say on Clemson here in a minute, so I'll just focus on Louisville playing Clemson in that ACC title game. You look at Louisville, they played in this ACC title game just 2 years ago, and this year they're third in the ACC odds right there with SMU. When I look at their schedule, they do have some big games, but they're spread out, so you're going to be able to prepare for those big matchups. And Jeff Brom, one of his great traits since he's been at Louisville, has been able to fill that quarterback position with a one-year senior transfer. We've seen it each of the last 2 years, and now they're going to have Miller Moss from USC. He's 23 years old. I think he fits right in with a Louisville offense that ranked 7th in college football last year, averaging 36.5 points per game. So give me Louisville versus Clemson in the ACC title.
Yeah, I can see Louisville, SMU, Miami, but I ended up going Clemson, Miami, only because I know I'm kind of on an island here with the Canes. The thing I like about Miami is, I'm a sucker for the trenches. I love the offense and defensive lines. I think if you're strong there, it keeps you in ball games. The offensive line to me is just so key. You ask Patrick Mahomes how his Super Bowl Sunday went. And I think those being strong in the trenches, it'll be interesting to see. I can't wait to watch that Miami Notre Dame game because Notre Dame's so physical. Is Miami there now? Can they deal with teams like that? I just like the talent on this team. And then Clemson, to me, Clemson would have to lose 2 ACC games and they still might get in. So I just don't see it happening. Clemson is a lock to me, and then I'm going to go with Miami.
Yeah, I do feel like Clemson is a lock because of the O-line, D-line, and what Tom talked about. And, having that experience return and having a coach that does great in big games. And it's because you have a coach that does great in big games. That's why I also like Georgia Tech. We look at how Georgia Tech played all of their tough games last year. They were right there, rubber to the road, ready to go for the challenge. They should have beaten Georgia. They did beat Florida State, which was, Florida State at the time. But look at how they beat Miami. And so when they are answering a call like that, week in, week out, and you have all this return in production coming back to a team that now expects to win. They were flirting with belief last year, but now they expect to go in there and win these games, have a battle-tested quarterback with a coach that's hard-nosed that is quoted with the best quote of last year saying, run the ball. That's why I like Georgia Tech and Clemson to meet in the ACC title game.
All right, well, that's all well and good, Emory, but I assume if you have those two teams meeting in the title game that you have Clemson, of course, winning that ACC title game.
Absolutely not, Sia. I have Georgia Tech winning. I've been on this network since the spring talking about Georgia Tech, singing the praises of the Rambling Wreck and how great Atlanta is as a city, right? So you look at Georgia Tech and you look at what they do well. They are able to run the football. They play fundamentally sound defense. You are not going to push them around up front. We saw Georgia have a problem with that. Clemson is built like Georgia along the line of scrimmage, so we know that's going to be the case. And this is a game that means so much for that program. Earlier in the season, we'll get a taste of that when they play each other. Then we'll see a rematch, in my opinion, in the ACC title game. But when you think about Haynes King in high leverage moments, he does not falter. He does not wilt. I like these guys over Clemson in a need to get it situation.
And it's no surprise for me here. I'm going to take Clemson. They've won it 2 out of the last 3 years. And then you look at Cade Klubnik, just a vast experience. Actually got his first start in the ACC championship way back in 2022, where he led them to a 29-point victory. So he's played in this ACC championship twice. Emory just touched on it. Dabo Swinney, he is a player's coach, and they just do not have letdowns in the big game under Dabo Swinney. 8-0 in the ACC title game, where they've won 7 of those games by 7 points or more, where they're actually challenged for the first time last year by SMU. So I like Clemson to win it for the third time in 4 years.
Yeah, I have to go with Clemson too. You look at this team and I think this is the most talent Dabo's had in the last few years, but I also think it's the best defensive line he's had since 2019. I feel like some of the guys who were going to Clemson ended up going to Georgia because they haven't had that dominant defensive line that they had when they were winning championships. I really like them on that side of the ball. So a lot of the talk's going to be about Klubnik, but it's this Clemson defense that really has me excited, and I think they're just too good for me across the board not to win the ACC.
Let's transition from that title game to ACC Coach of the Year. Tom, you go first.
Yeah, I'm going to go with Manny Diaz at Duke. I'll talk more about Duke in a little bit here, but listen, I know he doesn't have Cooper Flagg, but Duke won 9 football games last year. Does anyone care? I think this, they're going all in on nil. I think this program's headed in the right direction. All the talk was about Belichick in North Carolina. Watch out for Duke. I think Manny Diaz is a heck of a coach.
Listen, if you guys have been watching the show out there, the viewers, last segment you learned about teases, right? I teased something I'm gonna share later on, and now you're about to learn about layered bets. Because if I have Georgia Tech and Clemson playing in the ACC title game with Georgia Tech winning, that means Georgia Tech is playing some really good football, which also means Brent Key is going to win Coach of the Year, right? That's how you layer things out, right? Stacking blocks like Milton Hershey. That's a reference right there for you. But when you think about Brent Key and how he coached last year, what he meant for this football team, how well they played in all of those big games. And if they're going to go do what I expect them to do out there on the field, even if they get the upset of Clemson early in the season and they don't win the ACC title game, the fact that they would have gone on a nice little run and maybe upset Georgia in the end, Brent Key would be the talk of college football, therefore winning Coach of the Year.
And I'm going to go with Jeff Brom from Louisville. He's consistently had the Cardinal ranked inside the top 25 his first 2 years as coach, got as high as 10th when they started off 10-1 in 2023. But this year, they're right outside of the top 25 going into the season. So there's going to be more of a surprise element if this Cardinal team does have success. And then he's one of those few college coaches that has vested interest in Louisville. He played there as a college football player from 1989 to 1993. So he wants this program to have success. Last year, they were right on the doorsteps, close games in those big matchups that they lost against Miami, Notre Dame, and SMU. So I think the Cardinal have another successful season in the ACC rewards Jeff Brom as ACC Coach of the Year.
Let's move along to favorite ACC win total bet. And Zach, I want to start with you for a couple reasons. One is you haven't been able to give out a win total bet. And two, well, Syracuse is in the ACC. And I couldn't help but notice that behind you is a bunch of Syracuse memorabilia, 2, 3, 4 things there. I got to think that has you leaning maybe subjectively to the Syracuse over, right?
I wish there, Sia. But as the summer has continued, we've seen this win total continue to be hammered on the juice side for the under on Syracuse. I heard Tom and Emory both agree with me here, and it's just so hard dealing with the turnover from this Syracuse program. Dino Babers may have been let go prior to last season, but there was a lot of good talent that Fran Brown was able to inherit. Rondé Gadsden, who's off to the NFL, LaQuint Allen, their running back, off to the NFL. And for Fran Brown in his first year, he hit a home run in the NIL portal, being able to land Kyle McCord and Jackson Meeks, who are also off to the NFL. And usually when you have this many transitions with a program, you can get by that third, fourth game of this season where you can go through those growing pains. But for Syracuse, their schedule is just so difficult. They've got Tennessee, they've got Notre Dame, all your road games, SMU, Clemson, Miami, Georgia Tech. Is just such a difficult schedule. And when you're playing at home, you have to face 2 of the 3 teams you lost to last year in Boston College and Pittsburgh. So for me, they may have a solid team on paper talent-wise, but the schedule is just too difficult. I'll go under 5.5 wins for Syracuse.
Yeah, I'm going to go under Stanford 3.5. I mentioned it earlier. I think the program is in shambles. And I'll say this, with that monster schedule, if Frank Reich wins 4 games, he should get some consideration for ACC Coach of the Year. But I just don't see it. I don't see 4 wins on the schedule. I think they'll be lucky to get 3.
I like Virginia over 6.5. When Tony Elliott is cooking on offense, he has great tailbacks. Now, he brought in 2. He got Harrison Whaley, came in from Wyoming/NIU. Terrific tailback, but the one I'm excited about is Jamari Taylor, who transfers in from North Carolina Central. Think James Cook stylistically. That's what he has. That's what they're going to get, and that run game is going to help spearhead, along with Chandler Morris, who was a fantastic quarterback at North Texas.
Gentlemen, thank you very much for that. Emory and Tom, I know you're sticking around. Zach, you got to go. Thanks for joining us there, and thanks for all the objectivity on your team, Syracuse. Coming up next, we haven't talked at all really about Florida State. We got to cover the Florida State expectations, a little Bill Belichick talk, some sleepers, and Chip Patterson joins the huddle. That's coming up next on The Early Edge. We're back on The Early Edge, brought to you by BetMGM, the sportsbook born in Vegas. And we bring you Chip Patterson along with Tom Casale and Emory Hunt. Chip, I got to start with you. A lot of ACC talk already on The Early Edge, but I do want to maybe talk about some sleepers, maybe some teams that are not getting enough love nationally. Who you got in that category?
I would have to look to Durham and the Duke Blue Devils, because I think that we've got a real situation where not enough people realize that this is not your father's Duke Blue Devils. This is not your grandfather's Duke Blue Devils. This might not even be, depending on your age, your great-grandfather's Duke Blue Devils, because it has not been since Steve Spurrier was the head coach of Duke that we've had this kind of year-over-year consistency. And what Manny Diaz mentioned going into this season is something that kind of blew my mind, which is that if you are a senior at Duke, all you know is winning. All you know is 8-win or 9-win seasons. All you know is taking down top-ranked teams and rushing the field. The idea that, playing at Duke means that you are a lesser than, they don't believe it in that room. They don't believe it on this campus. This is a team that can go and win 8 or 9 games. Once again, we love the pickup from Tulane with Darian Mensah, but really Chandler Rivers, this defense, they just got a lot of pieces that I'm very high on. I think Duke is being slept on.
Yeah, I'm with Chip. I like, what is this? Is it November already, Chip? We're talking about Duke. I mean, February. It's almost March Madness. It's crazy. It's Duke football, and that's where we're at. Duke football. I honestly think teams like Duke and Kansas, people just can't wrap their minds around them being good in football. And sometimes you get value. And this is a good program. They're all in on nil. Listen, that Darian Mensah, getting him from Tulane, if he went to a Big Ten or an SEC school, it's all we'd be hearing about is what an upgrade it is at quarterback. It's kind of going under the radar. That's a massive upgrade for Duke. 13 starters returned from a 9-win team. Listen, if you're looking for, everyone says who's this year's Indiana. Maybe it's Duke. They are a very good football team, and I think they're the sleeper in the ACC.
I'm going with Virginia. Listen, and when Virginia was dominant, you got to go back to what? Terry Kirby at running back. Then you move on to Tiki Barber. Then you move on to Thomas Jones. Well, they got another one that I'm excited about, and Jamari Taylor coming in from North Carolina Central. I said, it reminds me a lot of James Cook stylistically. Tony Elliott has 2 backs that he could really rely on this year. Waylay coming in from Northern Illinois and Wyoming, and now you have 2 talented tailbacks with some starters returning, and his offense is predicated on having good tailbacks. He got a great one in Taylor. I think Virginia's being criminally slept on in the ACC this year.
Let's move along to UNC. Tom, we did touch a little bit on Bill Belichick. I'm curious what you think, what you're expecting from him, frankly, not just this year, but just the program in general, maybe over the next couple of years. Does this feel like a failed experiment to you, or that it's about to be, or is this something where UNC is going to be really feeling good about Bill Belichick at the helm?
Yeah, it's interesting. Years ago when I was in New England, someone I trust said Bill would love to end his career at Navy. If you don't know, Bill's dad coached at Navy. He grew up on the Naval Academy. He loves Navy. And so I always did think there was a chance he could go to college. Obviously the Navy job wasn't open, but he's always been infatuated with the college game. So I'm not surprised he came here at the end of his career. To me, Bill 5 years ago in college made more sense than Bill today. With all this stuff, you saw Nick Saban get out as soon as he could, and you're seeing some of the older coaches leave. I think a lot of this is about getting his son a head coaching job. I think it's one and done, maybe 2 years. I don't think they're going to be bad. I don't think it's going to be a disaster, but I just don't see Belichick being here for 3-4 years.
Bill Belichick's kind of sandbagging results here for 2025. He's talking about their recruiting efforts for 2026, making sure that we're pushing back those goalposts a little bit. I think that they're going to exceed expectations. I do. I think that this North Carolina football team is going to finish the season with 8-9 wins and most of the season look really competitive. But I think that what we will see on October 4th when the Clemson Tigers roll into Chapel Hill is the difference between being pretty good against your schedule and being a team that can go and compete nationally. So I think North Carolina exceeds expectations year one, but realizes there's still a long way to go to get up to competing at a college football playoff level.
Emory, there is a team in the ACC that certainly did not exceed expectations last year and certainly did not get close to 8 or 9 wins. It's Florida State, and it's weird to say that a 2-win team, Florida State, we're expecting better things from them this year, correct?
Yeah, they can't be any worse than was last year. I mean, Thomas Castellanos, big fan of how he talks smack, big fan of what that means for inspiring the teammates around him. Think how Diego Pavia does with Vanderbilt. I think we'll see a competitive bunch at Florida State this year. Again, Castellanos adds a little bit more juice to that offense, and I think that'll carry out throughout the rest of the team.
Oh, it could get worse. Yeah, it can. This could be horrendous. The key, look, it's a dice roll. When you get this many players from the transfer portal, they haven't built those relationships with each other. The idea of playing for your brother is a little bit different at another program when you stack year over year of experience. Last year, they got demoralized by early losses and they quit. They have a really tough schedule, including the opener against Alabama. And if all of a sudden you go through the first half of that schedule and your only wins are against East Texas A&M, Kent State, and Virginia, well, they might get demoralized once again. So it's going to be on Mike Norvell and a retooled coaching staff to keep that locker room together because once again, they are relying on portal players for success.
Yeah, I think they're going to be improved, but they won 2 games last year, so I don't really know how improved. I just don't like the way they're using the portal. I think these major teams, they fill in cracks with the portal. I think it's hard for these teams in these bigger conferences to go get 20 guys in the portal and expect to compete for a national championship. So I think they'll be improved. I don't know how much, though.
Extreme makeover Florida State edition for sure. Very curious to see how that works itself out. If you want conversation like this, talking about Florida State, the ACC, college football, NFL, MLB, NBA, join the SportsLine members only Discord server. If you're a SportsLine member and you're getting all the picks and model simulations and all those things, it's free to jump over to the Discord and get all of the insider info and talk that you hear on this show and across the board on every sport. Again, free to SportsLine members, the SportsLine Discord server. Well, we talked about Castellanos. We're going to talk about Klubnik. We got to talk about these quarterbacks in the ACC. That's coming up next with Chip, Tom, and Emory. We are back on the early edge, brought to you by BetMGM. And speaking of BetMGM, they've got Cade Klubnik third in the Heisman Trophy odds. Emory, I'm going to start with you. Can he win it?
Can he? Yes. You know how the award goes. You know, top quarterback, high-level team. But for me, the better bet is for Haynes King at plus 6,500 to win it, right? Because if you're following me on this show, you know I've been 10 toes down. Listen, I am standing strong with this one. If you are sick right now, you want me as your last antibody because I'm standing there fighting for you, right? This guy in Georgia Tech, and if they're going to win games this year like I expect them to, that's something to put a little sprinkle on. But yes, can Cade Klubnik win it? Of course he can.
Yeah, he can win it, but I think these are terrible odds. I don't like plus 900. I would need 15-1 to come in on him. And one of the reasons I don't bet a lot of these awards is you almost got to be a fortune teller because you got Clemson LSU in week 1. So if you like Klubnik or if you like Nussmeier, whoever wins that game, their odds are going to be long gone because they're going to be cut in half. So you're trying to kind of predict who's going to win that game. But for me, plus 900 with Klubnik, I like him, but I just don't think he's a big enough star who's going to carry the team for him to get the Heisman at this number.
Grab it right now, because what Tom said is right. If you like Cade Klubnik to win the Heisman Trophy, you think that he is going to perform well against LSU, because against most defenses that Clemson plays, he's going to put up ridiculous numbers and not be on the big stage and not be impressing Heisman voters. His entire Heisman candidacy lies with that opener against LSU. So if you like him, buy it now, because like Tom said, if Clemson does win that game, well, then it's going to go way shorter. And if Clemson loses, he ain't winning the Heisman Trophy.
And I also couldn't help but notice on that BetMGM graphic that Lenore Sellers, his odds keep getting shorter and shorter. Just putting that out there for everybody. All right, let's talk about Carson Beck. Chip, I start with you. We talked about Miami earlier in the show, but you weren't with us. Is Carson Beck the right man for the job?
Oh, I think he's got a great opportunity. I love what I'm hearing from Miami about his return to health. First of all, I mean, we're talking about off-season elbow surgery, but number two, also just the way that he started to familiarize himself with an offense led by Shannon Dawson that was absolutely explosive. Now, they've got some personnel questions, but I think Carson Beck has all of the tools to be very successful. And y'all, he's wearing number 11. We are channeling Ken Dorsey energy. Let's bring the U all the way back with Carson Beck leading the way.
Yeah, listen, I'll tell you what happened to Carson Beck. You know, word got out last year that he might be the first pick in the NFL draft, and people like me went crazy because I don't think he's the first pick in the NFL draft. But now I think people have gone the other way, too far on Carson Beck. Like, you know, listen, the guy won a lot of games at Georgia. Now, the thing with Beck is you got to look at that Alabama game, because that's classic Carson Beck. First half, I mean, he threw like 20 picks. Second half, I mean, he was red hot. He's got to be somewhere in the middle there. He just can't turn the ball over so much in big games. But when you're looking at the transfer portal and quarterbacks, I mean, there weren't a lot of guys that you're going to get more experience and better than Carson Beck. I think he's going to do fine. He just can't be Cam Ward. It can't all be on his shoulders, or that's going to lead to a disaster.
I mean, yeah, he's fine, you know, because he has experience. He started a lot of games. But I just wake me up when Carson Beck gets to a tough game and he has to make plays. That's when you want to see if he's changed from what we saw at Georgia and what we will see at Miami. So until then, I'm going to say, sure, he can play. Yeah, I mean, 9-3, that's great for Miami, for Carson Beck. But in terms of like elevating this team and to new heights to where Cam Ward couldn't, I don't see it.
A couple minutes left. I want to get to another quarterback at least, and it's Miller Moss, the transfer from USC. Tom, immediate impact for Miller Moss at Louisville.
Oh, yeah. I mean, Jeff Brom's a great quarterback coach. We talked about it earlier, and Louisville's a good team. I think they're going to be right there in the mix. So, yeah, listen. He showed signs at USC. I thought he did pretty well. I actually think Brom is probably a better quarterback coach, and I think he's going to get the most out of him. I think Louisville, for me, one of the most interesting teams entering the season. So, yeah, I'm in on Miller Moss.
I believe so. He's a point-and-shoot quarterback, and we saw that at USC. We'll see it a lot more at Louisville.
Man, Jeff Brom got Jack Plummer to the league. Y'all seen Jack Plummer in these preseason games? He made Jack Plummer look like, he had him as an ACC runner-up. Jeff Brom's an amazing quarterback coach. I think Miller Moss will be set up for success.
I mean, Plummer just taking haymakers from Chip Patterson for no apparent reason. You didn't need to do that to him, but fair enough. It's a very, very good argument. Tom Casale, Chip Patterson, Emory Hunt, thank you very much for all of the analysis. I do want to say we're doing the same thing tomorrow for the Big 12, but what a great show we had today. And ladies and gentlemen, you get this type of content, certainly on the Early Edge on CBS Sports Network, but you also get it on the Early Edge SportsLine YouTube channel. That's where we do a show every single Monday through Friday at 10 o'clock in the morning. We've got Chip Patterson there. We've got Emory Hunt there. We got Tom Casale, a rotating cast of SportsLine cappers and experts that come into this show on the YouTube channel. But stay tuned to CBS Sports Network and see us tomorrow at 12 o'clock for the Big 12 preview. Meanwhile, have a great day, everybody.